Awesome. So I think everybody here is fairly creative. So I think maybe I'll just kind of I'll shift the speech a little bit to maybe a bit more of a personal level first, and then we can get into the crypto stuff towards the end. So let me share my screen. Actually, before I do that, so a bit of an intro to me. I'm 37 now, and I've had a bit of a wild journey over my life. I've done a lot of different things. I grew up in Joburg, and I went to primary school at a co-ed school, and then I went to high school at an all-boys school, which I didn't love, and I ended up leaving that and going to a few other schools, and I ended up going to about 5 different high schools because I didn't have such a good time in high school. I seem to have a problem with authority, and I think this is why radical really resonates with me, which I'll try and get into a little bit. Let me just turn that off. I think that really spurred my direction in life, not enjoying authority. And I think most creative people don't really play with authority that well, or at least unwarranted authority. I think we live in a world where the name of the game is politics and government and an authority that is not always representative of us, the people. And this is how I've eventually got into crypto, but I'll take you a bit through that journey. So after high school, I studied IT engineering, and I worked in that for a while. I started a company with a friend. We did that for a few years. I then moved down to Cape Town in 2005. And I started bartending. I had enough of the IT stuff. I was like, no, I'm going to bartend now. So I started bartending at Cape Tacuba here in Kalk Bay, which was lots of fun. I then went traveling for a while. For 2 years, I went to New Zealand and Australia and Europe. Then came back and I studied software engineering and got certified with a Microsoft certification, and then started building websites and different products for people myself. I did that for the next kind of 7 years, in between pursuing my acting aspirations. So I always enjoyed acting as a child, and used to drag my parents out to the theater and say, take me to the theater, take me to the theater. And acting, as everyone knows, is a bit of a tough gig. So you've got to support yourself if you're not making too much cash from the acting. Luckily, I landed a few roles, and I did a bunch of commercials for America and Europe and South Africa, and that kept money coming in. But I supplemented that with building websites and building projects for people. I then I basically left South Africa and moved to Australia full time in 2012. And that's when I started full-time into product management. I did a few different spheres in that area. I did QA, I did customer support even, and then stepped full-time into product owning. That was tons of fun in Australia, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about different cultures and different attitudes, and the Australian culture is certainly a very unique one. They're such a happy people, but they've got such a deep sadness inside of them too. And I think it's a testament to not living a radical life, which I'll hopefully get into a little bit in a minute. And that was lots of fun. And then I came back to South Africa and started working at Luno, which I had a blast in the beginning until the fun ran out. And then I decided to jump ship and do my own thing, start my own ship. And so here I am today, owning this crazy thing called a cryptocurrency exchange. It's kind of bizarre. I never really thought I'd end up here, but that's been the journey. Yeah, and so that's kind of how I got here. But I think, let me share my screen and show you a bit of the presentation I put together. Yeah, let's see. Okay. I'll try desktop. All right, cool. Let me minimize that. Okay. I presume everyone can see this. Just shout out if you can't. And let's see how we go. Okay, cool. So I've got a bit of an overview, and don't worry, it looks kind of maybe like a lot of stuff, but it's just kind of keynotes along the way. So yeah, a good place to start is with, what does this word radical really mean? I mean, it's such an interesting word. It's got so many different meanings. And, you know, when I looked at it, I obviously have my ideas of what radical means. And I think we all have. It's a word we're all familiar with. We've all known it throughout our whole lives. And, you know, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were like rad. We used to say rad. I still say rad a lot. And it's quite a very diverse word. And so I just looked it up on the net and went to this site here and pulled out some definition of it. I don't know how accurate it is, but I presume it's pretty accurate. And it all started here, roughly the 14th century. And the original definition is this: having roots. Radical meant having roots. It didn't mean anything that it means today, just having roots. And it then evolved, you know, about 200 years later, it became going to the origin, what is essential. And I think that's kind of interesting because they basically started to realize as a people, as the consciousness of that time, they thought that having roots, that was the essentialness. That's essential. There's other stuff you can add to your life, but as long as you've got the roots, that's the base, which was nice. And then, you know, roughly, what's that, 100, 200, 350 years later, 250 years later, it got to mean political reform. And this is around about the time the Liberal Party kicked off in the United Kingdom. And it's interesting because this definition was also more about getting back to the roots. Obviously, the political system had lost its way. It wasn't quite serving the people, if it ever was. And this concept of radicalness started to form here and started to have a life inside of this political arena, which meant reform. And what was the reform? It was getting back to the roots. It was like, you're not serving us. And then, interestingly, it evolved even more into this here, 1921, unconventional. And this is where it gets a little bit disturbing for me, because something that is so positive initially and so unique and understood by all of us as a human being race, it started to mean unconventional. Now, so in other words, the consciousness of the time had gotten to a point where the political side was so mainstream, it was so mainstream and so not in service of the roots, so not in service of that if you were radical, if you were trying to be in service of your roots, you were considered unconventional. And this aligns with a lot of deeper stuff that went on. Propaganda started to come in. Obviously Goebbels and Hitler and the World War started to arrive around about this point, and this became more and more an item. It then kind of evolved and got to the 1970s with the surfers, and for them, the edge of control. Obviously, if you're a surfer, you know that you want to ride the edge of the wave. You want to push it as far as you can. And if you hit it hard, it's radical. It's radical. And I presume that word and that adaptation came out of these people who were born in this time. Their parents, the surfers' parents, would have probably been unconventional people, and they would have raised these surfers, maybe. And it kind of makes sense that there's a bit of a throughput there. And then, of course, the youth from the 1980s onwards, we really looked at the surfers, and we looked at what was cool, and we looked at TV and cartoons, and this word featured quite a bit. And it came to mean cool, came to mean a cool thing, like what is cool, what is good, what's positive. It's a nice thing. And I think this is still where it is today. Obviously, there is the more politically charged meaning is still around, which I'm talk about in a sec. But I think predominantly we use it, at least we use the word rad in a way that's cool, and radical has become aspirational. I don't think radical is something unconventional necessarily. I don't think it's anything negative at all. It's become something that is aspirational. And so that's basically, I think, how we've arrived at that. So let me take you a bit through the journey. And what I've got here is I've just got a bit of an overview of what radical means to me and how it's worked for me and how I've and how it's led me to arrive at cryptocurrency and arrive at forming Cape Crypto. Yeah, so here we go. Okay, so radical. All right. Yeah, this is a word that was familiar to all of us. Like I said, it was bred into all of us from a very young age. It's a positive thing. It's aspirational. It's a compliment, and it also adds meaning. I think one of the roots behind radicalness or radicality or being rad is that there's meaning in it. You only ever exercise a radical item or task or thought because there's meaning in it for you. You find some sort of meaning. And this is the root of anything that is radical that we find today. There's meaning. There's normally somebody or someone that has a strong drive to do something or think something or be something or whatever, and it becomes radical. The regular definitions are something like fundamental, extreme, political, and that's fair. But I think for our talk, it's a bit deeper than that. And I think in order to really understand it, we have to get a bit deeper on this Friday morning and really open up, you know, how do you get to being radical? And there we go. I think the first step in being radical and having radicalness an experience for us as a human race is you have to be open to new ideas. That's just a non-negotiable. You have to be open to new ideas, which means you have to be open to learning. You have to be open to change, open to growing. And I think for a lot of people, what's hard is open to being wrong, because with this comes the experience of pain and love. The second you start learning stuff or changing, that's when you go out of your comfort zone and you start to feel things that are good and you start to feel things that are bad, and you start to find love. You go down the deep trails and you find lots of pain because you're going to other darker paths maybe, but that's the start. And I think what happened for a lot of us after school, we'd been in this, in this kind of propaganda machine for 12 years, where new ideas were not allowed. They were so not. It was, these are the rules. This is the curriculum, and this is how the world works, and that you must just deal with it. And I think a lot of us that rebelled against that, we were like, oh, that's not how I see it. That's not really the ideas that I have. And there was a big drive to get our ideas across, at least for some of us. That came early enough that we wanted to express. It was like, this is not okay. We needed to say something. And depending on the sphere you grew up with and the people that you had around you that would allow you to express these ideas. Some of us went traveling. I went traveling, and some of my good friends went traveling. And I think the attraction to traveling for someone who has this disposition, who doesn't quite know that they're radical, but that it's in there somewhere, the attractiveness is that you're going to be going to all these things, which is basically an exploration, but it's about seeing different perspectives, seeing new cultures, new people. It's different. It's something that is different to what you've been force-fed your whole life. And that is a space where you can be challenged. You'll change, obviously. You learn to adapt. You're different. You recognize that you are different, and there are different peoples in the world. There are different people, different cultures, different perspectives. It's unknown. You step into this space, and it's a very scary space initially because there's no safety, there's no security. You don't know what to expect. Especially back in our day, before internet and YouTube was so prevalent, you couldn't just hop online and Google, yeah, cool, Spain, hostels, show me some videos. You kind of had to just book one and then land there and go for it. And very quickly you realize that there are so many other people around the world that are doing the same thing. And it's so exhilarating, it's so exciting. And you start to see different people, different identities start to emerge. Because all of these things, the whole thing of exploration and challenging yourself and learning about different people and being faced with different experiences is that it reinforces or it helps you discover your self-identity. And I think for me, at least during this time, it was a big part of embracing myself. And that meant embracing both the light and the dark, and the good and the bad sides, right? Strengths and weaknesses. Which, of course, these are kind of human definitions for us. You know, we just are. We're humans, and we are. We have the way we are, and that's it. But we, as people, have come and put some definitions onto things to describe different aspects of ourselves. And along the way, we've been taught that certain sides of ourselves are good and bad. And generally, that's phrased in terms of light and dark. But I think when you need to know yourself, when you're discovering who you are, that's when you actually have to look in the darkness. You have to take the flashlights and spray it in the darkness and say, wow, okay, actually, yes, I do want to do that. Ooh, actually, yes, I did do that. Yes, I do feel that way. Yes, I don't like that person. Yes, I want this. You know, you start to having the space, at least when you're traveling, because it's a space where you know, there's that saying, you know, don't shit on your doorstep. That's when you go traveling, you can do a little shitting on the doorstep. You know, you can kind of test these out and just have a feeling of you know, is this something that works for me? Can I try this? And you can do it without consequence. But if you're still in your home group and your home circle, it's a bit more difficult because there's consequences. You know, you've got other things to think about. And so, yeah, so, you know, traveling where you can form your identity, you can start to discover these things. And the more and more you try things like, you know, different clothes, different hairstyle, different thoughts, you read different books. Maybe you go to the Scientology school because they pull you in off the street. Maybe you go to church and, you know, you listen to some masses. You definitely smoke a lot of pot and talk about philosophy till 4 a.m. at the hostels. Like, you know, you really open up and you can talk about all the things that, that you probably couldn't do for the previous 12 years at school. And so, you know, all of these things, which I'm going to point to, they all kind of lead to this concept here, which is individual. And I hope this is not a loaded word. I think it's a beautiful word, but yeah, more and more in the media these days, I see this becoming a bit more of a loaded word. And but today it's a positive word. And what individual means, I think, and why it's important in this discussion of radical, is that it's only through being an individual, a true individual, that you can get to this sense of self, a true sense of self. And that's because as a true individual, you become an independent thinker. You are an individual, and so you start thinking your own thoughts. You allow your own thoughts to bubble up. You allow your own ideas to flow through, and you allow yourself the time to look at them. You don't shut them off. And that an independent thinker often then becomes, you know, a challenger, you know, a disruptor, contrarians. They offer unique opinions, unfamiliar opinions, obviously, because they're unique. They come from an individual, and they likely often are original. And so people haven't seen or heard of them before, these ideas. And they can be very, you know, disrupting or offensive to some people. Of course, the key one here of being an independent thinker is that it's not ideologue. There are no ideologues as an independent thinker. An ideologue is you know, someone who blindly follows an ideology or a faith or a belief or a person or whatever. You know, that's basically an ideologue. But as an independent thinker, you wouldn't do that because you're constantly thinking, right? You constantly have critical thought. And you're not led by the crowd. You might work with the crowd. It's not like you're anti-crowd. I'm not talking about being a, you know, what do you call it? A sort of revolutionary who wants to burn down the world. No, you know, I'm just talking about someone who forms their own opinions, exercises critical thought, evaluates the world, evaluates things around them. Performing these actions, I think it leads you to self-belief and self-trust, because it's only through truly using yourself as your tool in the world that you learn to trust it, and you learn to believe in its ability, right? Which all leads and reinforces this true sense of self. And when you start to tap into that true sense of self, with your real self, your soul, your inner voice, that you start to play in this world of self-love, self-care, self-respect. And because it's you, and you need to love yourself and care and respect yourself. But if you're not looking after yourself as an individual, if you're following the crowd, and you're part of a mob, and you're letting other people speak your thoughts for you and tell you what to think and how to think it and how to think about it, they basically give you the thoughts. You've got no self-respect, because you have no self, because you aren't an individual. You are just a pawn moving along someone else's ideology. And once you get into this true sense of self, that's when the power starts to come. And good power. I mean, power of self-power where you can start to choose in the world. You can start to do what you want. You start to not only do what you want, but know what you want, and then go out and get it. It becomes this wonderful space, and it's certainly something that I aspire to all the time. I'm quite frequently in this power space, but there's times when I drop out of it, and it's not a good feeling. I don't like it. I don't like being in groups where all of a sudden I'm not who I am, and I think we all know that feeling when we're with certain people, we just don't feel good. We just don't feel ourselves, or certain spaces, certain environments. And so, at 37 now, I'm still pretty young, but I'm getting to that point where I'm like, you know what, if I'm not feeling this sense of self, if I'm not feeling in my own power, I'm not going to stay in that situation. If I can't change the situation to try and get here and collaborate with the people so that we both have sense of powers, or we all have a sense of empowerment, then I'm out of there. And of course, the points of the power, because power without any purpose is it's a bit pointless, right? That all leads to this concept, I think, of originality. And I feel that this is our true purpose as a people. And I know we're going so deep here, but I think we'll pull out in a second. Is that the originality and being original, which comes from being an individual and having individual thoughts and ideas, and then having the confidence and power to act on them, you then come up with this beautiful concept of self-expression. And self-expression is the keystone of life, because that is where purpose and meaning lie. And, for all of us that searched for this purpose and meaning earlier on rather than later on, this was a big challenge to work these things out. What is my purpose and all of these things. And at least for me, but I think for most people, and it doesn't have to be an artistic sense, but for most people, it is self-expression. How do you express your soul? What are your soul's wants and needs on this planet? And when you're original, you start to hear these terms. You start to hear things like genius. All the geniuses on earth, they were original. They all the maths guys, they invented these equations, and the doctors invented things, and the inventors, Da Vinci, etc., innovators, creators, artists, all of these people, all of these concepts, these wonderful aspirational adjectives. We give them to original people. And getting back to the roots, a radical, this stuff all leads there. It's all the same thing. And why it's interesting, and why I really liked this definition down here, where is it, of having roots, and why I like this, and why I really think that this is the underlying subtextual meaning of the word radical, is that when you are in your own power, and when you are in your own original state as an individual, you're in your root, because your soul and yourself is the root of you. It's the root of each of us. That's our root. And so being radical is actually just being your sense of self. And I really think that's a fantastic idea. And it's the way to think about it, because because if you are in your sense of self, you will start to do radical things. You will start to live a radical life. But that's only radical based on someone else's definition. For you, it's just normal. It's easy, it's self-expression, it feels good, it's natural, it comes fairly easily. The path flows, the river flows for you. And you feel good because you're in your own power. But outside people might label that as radical. He's radical. That's a radical idea. I've never thought of that before. It's a disruptive idea. Shit, they're a radical political party, And yeah, so I thought that was quite a beautiful little tie-in. That at least that's how I see it, and that's how I feel it. Okay, cool. So let me get onto the crypto stuff. And yeah, so I spoke a little bit about this. Like I had lots of different occupations over my time. Because I was following these ideas and I was striving to be an individual and allow my self-expressions to come out and stubbornly let them come out no matter what the cost, selfishly. And I hurt some people along the way, definitely, but I also gave a lot of love to a lot of people along the way. And I think that's just part and parcel of it. Remember, back here, open to new ideas. That means love and pain. We can't live in an isolated world where things are always in a state of bliss. It doesn't exist. It doesn't make sense. Bliss is a relative description based on pain. You have pain, you have no pain, and then you have bliss. And yeah, so anyway, so yeah, so I stubbornly followed my experiences and followed my intuitions and my wants and my desires, and I really tried to get to the core of who I was so that I could understand my purpose and my meaning. And I went through all these things like bartending. I founded a couple of companies. I made some really terrible music videos. I directed a play and obviously music videos and some other artwork. I was an actor for a number of years. I did a couple of films. One of them is actually undiscoverable, but I'm certainly never going to tell anyone what that one is. And yeah, I did web development for 7 years, and of course, product management, which is a really great fit for somebody who's inquisitive and someone who has taken the journey, because product management is a role that demands multiple disciplines and the ability to context switch between them fairly quickly, and is both technically orientated and people management and stakeholder management and artistic design. It's quite a nice expert generalist role. So definitely keep that one in mind if anyone's thinking about something to do. Lots of fun, but lots of stress. And yeah, so out of this all, I just started to discover crypto. And cryptocurrency it's such a fucking brilliant invention. It's absolutely brilliant, and this is, it's clearly invented by a bunch of individuals, and we call them geniuses. They're innovatives, they're creatives, they exercise critical thought, they did not let the crowd follow them. All of these things led to the creation of cryptocurrency. And I'll give a quick primer about what crypto is, just in case anyone is unfamiliar still. So cryptocurrency is basically a digital asset, meaning that it is a store of value. And any asset, any money, dollar, euro, South African rand, these are all just stores of value. They're all just something that we can give to each other and transfer value around in exchange for something else that is deemed of value. This is how the monetary system at a very basic level works, right? You walk into the shop with your 10 rand, you say, give me that TV bar, that beautiful Beacon TV bar. Here's 10 rand, I'll get that TV bar, thanks. And they've said this TV bar is worth 10 rand storage of value. And you say, yes, I agree, here's my 10 rand storage of value. And that's, the evolution of the bartering system. But of course, we're at a point in time where this store of value is completely relative. Something has value if we declare it has value. If people think it has value, right? I mean, diamonds are just rocks on the ground, but at some point we said, yes, these are value. And of course, there's industrial applications, but I mean, it's not enough to warrant the value that we give to it. The true value from this stuff comes from the marketing, comes from the rareness of it. And it's the same thing with crypto. It's exactly the same thing. is that this is a store of value that can be safely, privately, with trust and secureness transferred around the world from anyone to anywhere at any point in time, and holds its store of value. It holds it. So it's a store of value and it is movable. You can actually transfer it. It's a fantastic concept. And just to step out there, you can think of it as a foreign currency. So if you were going overseas and you needed to buy some euros, you would go to the airport, go to one of the currency exchange shops and say, here's my 100 Rand. They give you, 10 euros, whatever it is. And it's the same thing. So you can take your 10 Rand and take it to an exchange such as Cape Crypto or Luna or Vala. And you say, here's my 10 Rand. They will give you 10 Rands worth of Bitcoin. So think about it like a foreign currency. That is basically what it is. It's almost the foreign currency of the future and the foreign currency of the internet. And it's ramping that way up very quickly now. A lot of people saw this coming much sooner, but it's still a big adoption phase at the moment. I think most of the world has heard about crypto. Whether they know what it is still coming to the education, but that's okay. And so what drives the change to moving to cryptocurrency away from traditional currencies, such as Rand, moving into a cryptographic currency? The crypto word, by the way, we don't have to worry about that. That's just the form of encryption that it uses to keep it secure and to how the technology works. But that word is kind of scary a little bit if you want to get into it. So sidestep that. Digital asset is a nicer way to think about it. It's a friendlier way. Yeah, okay. And so the crypto thing is, the true power behind it is that it's private, it's anti-centralization, it is anti-corruption, it's anti-Big Brother, it's self-governing. It's all of these wonderful things which someone who is individual and somebody who wants to stay in their own power and not be swayed by outside forces, this is incredibly attractive. It's incredibly powerful. The big one, of course, is this anti-Big Brother thing. And we've all watched the world start to become more and more draconian, especially in this last 6 months with this whole lockdown fiasco across the world, for something which doesn't really seem to exist. We look at the data and there's nothing really happening here, and there's something really scary going on. And, the conspiracy theory stuff, maybe not, whatever, I'll leave that up to you to decide. But right now, what's very important is that we retain our sense of power, because as soon as the government becomes too draconian and takes over all the financial system, they'll be able to create rules and turn off your money whenever they want. If you do something bad, if you break the speed limit on your car, or maybe you have one too many beers on a Friday night, or maybe you were a little late in paying your tax, or who knows what. They could easily just take the money from your account and say, there you go, sorry. Or if you're being really bad, they just shut your bank account off. If you're saying stuff that they don't want to hear, they could just turn off your bank account. These are real things that are happening. They're really scary. And it's starting to happen in China. You can look there for a bit about the future of what's coming into the West. And it's a very scary space to get into. So the power of this is that it retains individuality. No one can own this. Once you own cryptocurrency and you keep it, and you have the keys to this, no one can actually take that cryptocurrency from you. They can't stop it. They can't block it. They can't do anything with it. You can send it to anyone. This is the power of this technology. It's truly amazing. And we truly don't need a central body to look after our money. We don't need it, but it sometimes is nice to have. I obviously still have bank accounts. We all have bank accounts. And it is an important thing. And I don't think centralized monetary system is ever going away. I think we'll always have that, but it'll always run in parallel. We'll always have cryptocurrency as an individual thing where I want to spend money. I want to send it to Europe tomorrow. I don't want to go through the South African Reserve Bank. They got nothing to do with it, right? My Bitcoin is there. It's in Europe. But there's also going to be the centralized banks, because we'll need to manage things at a more surface level. And some people won't be comfortable with with managing the money themselves. They want the bank. They want the security of, ooh, a bank is there, right? So there will always be centralization in finances. But what's coming out now is decentralization. Decentralization, very cool word. Yeah, and so I got into this like in 2016-ish and started to play in it, and it was very cool. I've got some friends that were in it back in 2012, you know, and I was like, why did you tell me about it then, you bastard? And, you know, they've obviously made some good cash. And aside from the money thing, it's definitely looking towards the future and seeing what's coming in. So lockdown hit us, and yeah, I looked at all the data, and I was incredibly disillusioned with how the government approached the whole thing, and all the governments throughout the world. It was incredibly deceptive, I thought. You know, there was no open book. There was no public forum. There was no, here's the data we looked at. Here's why we made the decisions. In fact, it was confidential. They declared it confidential. Now, why would it be confidential? It makes no sense. These are our representatives. They're supposed to be our representatives making decisions that represent our thoughts and beliefs, and they're keeping big decision-making confidential. So that was incredibly disappointing. And when I looked at all the data that was available, there was no justification for it. Zero justification for this lockdown. No public comments. And of course, it's all led to this big erosion of individual expression. You know, for a long time, we were taught you cannot go out, you cannot associate with the people you want, you cannot wear these clothes, you must wear a mask on your face, you cannot exercise, you cannot be healthy. Like all of these things, you can't have a beer or smoke, you can't do what you want to do. This was a huge invasion of our human rights, a huge invasion. And for someone who's very radical and very individual, I felt this incredibly strongly. And you know, most of my friendship group also. And yeah, and I think at Luno, I started to have a rough time there at this point because cryptocurrency is this decentralized thing. It is almost the direct opposition to all of these draconian, big brother-esque you know, things that are going on in the world. Crypto is the counter to it. It's how we counter that. And so I always felt that, or wanted to feel that at Luno, that's what, that was the underlying sentiment, you know? That's what it was. And then, you know, Luno didn't quite respond to it in this way. And that's okay. Luno's a big company, you know, they're a corporate. And so they have to follow the rules now. So I totally understand that. But it was disappointing for me. And so I thought, you know what, this is no longer a space where I feel in my power. I need to do my own thing. And this was the perfect opportunity. It was the perfect opportunity because we were all working from home all of a sudden. There was no going out on a Friday night, so you didn't have to waste your time, you know, being hungover all weekend and losing all that valuable time where you could be creating instead. It became this perfect launch pad. And so I took the opportunity. I was like, you know what, it's on. So Luno and I parted ways as friends. And I started Cape Crypto. And Cape Crypto then, and what I'm going to start pushing very soon in my whole marketing and the whole ethos behind it is this: take control of your life, get your freedom. This is the point of it. And a lot of my content will start suiting towards this angle, where, you know, most of the other exchanges are still a little bit maybe cautious as to how they describe crypto. I want to jump in a bit more head first and really get to the core of this stuff, really explain the value. Yeah, and so one last thing I think I'll mention, I've really talked everyone's heads off for the past 40 minutes, I think. Sorry about that. I see the things popping up. I hope you haven't been saying like, Leon, time's up, time's up. I haven't seen any messages. So 2 minutes. And what it is that, and I'm going to borrow this from Fazam, who is the CEO and founder of Vala, another South African exchange, who I really admire, and I really like this guy. And I heard him talking at a conference a few weeks back, and he gave this beautiful description. And I think I'm gonna borrow it and share it with you now. And that is that, you know, they asked him, well, if cryptocurrency is this decentralization, if it's decentralized, right, meaning not a central power, how the hell does Vala or Cape Crypto fit in? Because Cape Crypto and Vala are centralized organizations, right? We are a central point where we can hold people's Bitcoin. We offer a wallet. And we still play with the banks. We still deal with that. So we are centralized organizations. And he gave this wonderful, very succinct answer. I'll paraphrase it. And he said, in this beautiful ocean that is decentralization, Vala and Cape Crypto is an island, an oasis of centralization. And I thought that was just so pivotal. It was so beautiful and so apt. And we do want to play in the space of a world where decentralization, where everyone can be their own power and have control in their own lives. But there are times when you need to dock your boat at that island and do a trade or do something, play in a centralized fashion. And so that's exactly what Cape Crypto is. We offer that port. It's a port where you can bring your ship in and exchange your Bitcoin for some rands and exchange your rands for some Bitcoin. And there'll be some cooler other projects coming in down the line. And yeah, so I think that's how I reconcile the decentralization, centralization paradigm. And that's how Cape Crypto came to be. So yeah, we've been running for 3 weeks. We've onboarded a little over 1,200 people. We just passed R1 million in turnover this week. So that's cool. It's still a drop in the bucket compared to the real numbers that are out there. But I think it's a testament to people wanting to pay lower fees because we offer the lowest fees in SA. And we're also South African targeted. We only exist in South Africa. We're not global. We are local. And again, that's more decentralized than a central exchange that is trying to be global. We operate at a national, local level because that's where individuals play. So the whole ethos is there. It's South Africa. We're in Cape Town. We're based in the Cape. We're here. We're tangible. Come check us out. If you're in town, call me up. Let's go for a coffee or a beer. That'll be great. Yeah, so I've stayed away from the politics, but I'll happily dig into some of my thoughts around that if anybody wants. But I know I've covered a ton of ground, so thank you very much. I guess I'm not sure, is it back to Dan or back to Philip? Thanks, guys. Thank you.